We are in the cockpit of the 1944 vintage Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, built by Boeing Aircraft Company. Boeing was from Seattle, Washington, but this aircraft was built under contract by Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach, California in 1945. This is the first real strategic bomber aircraft that was used by the U.S. Army Air Corps in World War II. Actually, the B-17 Flying Fortress was the first aircraft, the first American aircraft that was shot down. There was a group of 13 B-17s that flew into Pearl Harbor the day that Hickam Field was attacked, and one of the B-17s was shot down and burned on the runway. Luckily, all aboard survived, but it was one of the first aircraft that was into battle. This is the cockpit section of the B-17 Flying Fortress where the pilot and co-pilot would sit. As you notice, most of the aircraft is just literally bells and whistles and switches and dials and such. There's no computer technology back in 1944, so everything is analog and everything is mechanical. There are also, you'll notice there are modern radios in here. The Collins Foundation in flying these aircraft around the country have to keep these aircraft with modern avionics to fly in the air traffic control system today. So you'll notice that some of the avionics and radios have been upgraded, but otherwise it is exactly the way it was in 1944. Bombardiers and Navigators section of the B-17 Flying Fortress. This was one of the first strategic bombers that was employed by the United States Army Air Corps. This was unveiled in the late 1930s and saw service from 1939 through 1945. The Bombardier section includes the very, very famous and very, very secretive Norden bomb sight. It was one of the most highly sought-after pieces of technology during World War II. Bombardiers, if they were ever shot down, were always told to destroy it first. It was one of the first mechanical computing bomb sites that took into account wind drift, aircraft speed, and various other meteorological conditions, and could actually control the aircraft on a bomb run. The Bombardier would actually control the aircraft through the sight that he had. It was one of the first employments of an autopilot system on an aircraft in the 1940s. Your Navigator, also at the front, sat with the Bombardier. The Navigator brought various maps and charts along with him. This was the era before GPS, so he had to have a full table and bring out his slide rule and actually plot everything as they went along and determine where they were in space. If they were flying at night, traditionally they would have to use what's called an astrolabe, which would take sightings from stars at the dome at the top of the aircraft. They would actually employ that to take sightings off of stars and triangulate their position if they were flying over water or over land that they couldn't determine what it looked like on the ground. Again, this aircraft is completely unpressurized, so the walls that you see on the side are actually the exterior walls of the aircraft as well, so it offered little or no protection against fighter aircraft or anti-aircraft fire during combat. The aircraft, this is the radio operator's room. The radio operator, unlike radios today, which can fit in the palm of your hand, receivers and transmitters during World War II were primarily using old vacuum tube technology. So there was a large amount of boxes that would basically do various functions and various frequencies on the aircraft. So the radio operator actually had to have a lot of space. He would sit mainly at his desk there, and as you notice, there's a Morse code key on the right-hand side of the transmitter. He would be there monitoring various radio frequencies throughout the flight and maintaining radio silence amongst everybody else. The radio operator really was an intelligence officer. He actually listened for broadcasts over the target that might point to possible enemy interception or things that might be reported back to the War Department that might inform them about upcoming offensive or defensive acts by the enemy, either the Germans or the Japanese. Seen here are the mighty Wright 1820 radial engines. The B-17 Flying Fortress had 4 of these engines, producing about 1,200 horsepower apiece. They are radial engines, meaning that the cylinder arrangement is in a circle. The radial engines were, the cylinders were arranged in a circle to allow maximum cooling. They did not have a liquid cooling system like most cars would have, so these were air-cooled engines, which made them simpler to operate in the end.
Okay.
Much like on the B-24 Liberator, you had a tailgun position on the aircraft that would protect the entire aft portion of the aircraft. This again was another very, very lonely position. The operator was solely back here and pretty much was the only person able to effectively protect the aft portion of the aircraft. These are two 50 caliber Browning machine guns, just like the rest of the aircraft, and had about 600 rounds of ammunition each. The only area that the gunner was able to see through is this highly protected thick pane of glass. It is about 3 inches thick. It is armored, but the other windows on the side are literally only about 1/8 of an inch thick. The gunner would sight through this little device here, which was much like a pip that you'd see on a shotgun, and it would move in coordination with these guns back here. It had a very limited range of fire, only about 70 degrees, so it really was only effective at getting any aircraft that were coming right directly at the tail. Later on in the war, later B-17s had a much more effective, what was called a Cheyenne ball turret back here, which allowed a much more wide range of fire, go from basically 180 degrees on either side. In the forward portion of the aircraft, the Bombardier and Navigator had defensive armament as well. The B-17 Flying Fortress had a chin turret. This later version, the G model, was the only one that had the chin turret on it. It was controlled remotely by the Bombardier, who sat behind the large glass bubble at the top. It was remote controlled. He had a gun sight and a yoke that would control the gun turret from that position up there. The Navigator, who also sat in that same compartment, operated the two cheek gun positions, the two bristling machine guns sticking out the side of the nose. A lot of people ask about these markings on the side of the B-17 Flying Fortress. This is actually painted up as the 91st Bomb Group 909, which was an aircraft that flew over 140 missions during World War II. The bombs signify the missions that were flown on this aircraft by multiple crews. Traditionally, crew members would decorate the side of their aircraft with a little character or what was called nose art to personalize the aircraft and give themselves a little bit of a feeling of being at home. A lot of people ask about the Nazi swastikas on the nose of the aircraft. Those were considered to be called kill markings. Whenever a gunner on board this aircraft shot down an enemy aircraft that was attacking them, they would paint an enemy symbol on the front to signify that those were the aircraft that were downed by this aircraft. So in this case, this aircraft has downed 3 Nazi German aircraft during its time and during its 140 plus missions that it flew.